if you were to be able to look back, like on your legacy, let's just talk maybe solar specifically or your life, however you want to internalize it. What do you want like your legacy to be?
I think a lot of the stuff that we've been doing, you know, I for personally like made a change to the industry and to homeowners.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a positive change.
Yeah, positive.
Yeah, right. You can make changes in other ways as well. Just a positive change, you know. And I'm always open to like helping companies, reps. You know, I mean, you mentioned like the solar, you know, the Solar Pros group, you know, on Facebook. Solar Pros and Solar Community, all the different ones. People see I'm always in there when I can and answering questions. Yeah. I've always been a champion for people that like want to do things the right way.
Right.
And like, hey man, I have people from other companies, sales guys that they met at the office.
Yeah.
Like, hey man, I'm trying to understand how SRP works better. Can you help me out? Like, not a problem.
Yeah.
Right. But when it comes to like how solar works, things like that, how does tax credit work? You know, what's going on with this big beautiful bill, all that kind of stuff. Like, if we can help the industry get better by exposure.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times, like I said earlier, most of the stuff I think you see in the space is not on purpose, is not malicious, is people don't know any better.
Yep.
Nobody's ever trained them or they train them the wrong way.
It's like the telephone game. They heard what their manager said,
what their
manager said, and their manager
said.
So
I'm actually a big believer of like just getting information out, and then people will pick up on it and they'll start asking questions.
Right.
Right? And then they're like, holy crap, I've been doing this wrong.
Yeah.
Right? If they've been doing it wrong. And so really like from a legacy standpoint, like I hope that that's the kind of impact that I can make on the space. You know, I'm obviously not going to do this forever. Right, and so that's kind of that's what makes me passionate.
Awesome.
That's my big thing. That's what makes me, I guess, to wrap it up, like that's what makes me passionate about being in the space stuff.
Sure.
Right, because it's not easy.
Yeah. What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Be Bright podcast. I have maybe arguably the brightest mind in solar, Val Berechet, Sun Solar Solutions. And Val, I'm sure most people kind of know you, but if you don't mind, just give a quick little background about who you are and what's been going on with you.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you guys having me on. This is super cool. So Val Berechet, I'm CEO and co-founder of Sun Solar Solutions. We are a solar company installer in 4 states: Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and Florida. We started off about 10 years ago, so a little over 10 years ago. Nice. March of 2015 is when we started. We started off as a sales org. We'll probably talk a little bit more about the journey. Yep. But we started off as a sales org, became an installer in 2020, so about 5 years ago.
Cool.
And that's what we've been doing.
The best time to become an installer during COVID, right?
Are you still paying the electric company for power every single month? You're not only losing money, you're investing in someone else's future, not your own. Bright Home Energy has over 400 5-star reviews and over 100 5-star reviews on the BBB. That means real homeowners just like you are already making the switch with quality and peace of mind. We are the preferred solar installer for Solar Edge Technologies in Arizona. Not a title that was given, but a title that was earned through quality, structure, and peace of mind. As a NABCEP certified solar installer and an APS qualified technology installer, your solar installation with Bright Home Energy is not good, it's top tier. So the choice is yours. You can either keep paying your utility company every month, making them rich, or you can make the switch to solar and start investing in your future today.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to get into a lot of subjects as the big, beautiful bill just passed the Senate. It's going back to the House. Just feel like a lot to unpack there, just not about what's happening now, but what does that look for in the future. And, hey, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the Roofing and Solar Pros Facebook group.
There you go.
You're basically the president of that club, but interesting characters. But I do want to rewind first before we get into all that fun stuff. Life before solar, obviously – where you grew up, you kind of told us a little bit about your story earlier, but what was life like before solar? What were you doing before then, before you entered the solar space?
Yeah. So prior to solar, me and my wife actually had a marketing company, right? So it was called Print Graphics. We did all kinds of things, kind of like in the name, right? Print Graphics. There was a lot of print media.
Okay.
Right? So we would do brochures, business cards, websites, even. But our main product was called the Super Savings Magazine.
Okay.
And so it was basically imagine something like a Clipper magazine or Money Mailer, Val Pack, right? No relation, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Val Pack. And so basically that was our business. I did the sales side and kind of ran. I mean, it was small, like it wasn't. We mailed out 90,000 magazines a month. which kind of sounds like a lot, but it's relatively small, right? It was in the Northwest Valley.
Okay.
That's where we live. And so, I basically did the sales. We had a couple salespeople. It was basically door-to-door, business to business, right? So I would go to like a auto body shop, a restaurant, a nail salon, stuff like that, and try to sell them advertising in the magazine.
Okay.
And my wife would do the graphic design, right? So she does multiple things, but one of them, she's a graphic designer. And so she would do the ads, and then we would put together the magazine, and then we would mail it out. And then it was a cool business because we had 9 issues a year, right? And they came out about every 6 weeks. And we had a pretty good repeat rate of customers.
Okay.
And so probably about 85% of repeat customers.
Wow.
And so every time a new issue came out, you only had to go get a handful of new customers,
right.
Make 4 or 5 sales,
sure.
right? And that would only take about a couple weeks, let's say. And so a magazine would come out, and we'd have about like 2 to 3 weeks off.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Right? Because like the magazine would come out, I would go take them to the customers, businesses, pick up a check, right? And this will come into play a little later, but I would pick up a check, and then basically we were done. And then we would basically like go on vacation.
Yeah.
We just have some time off for like 2-3 weeks, come back, do it again, right? So it was a cool business. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't as lucrative as solar is, but it was cool. And we worked from home. Me and my wife, we've been together now 20 years.
Wow.
I want to say, but we worked together for 10 years from home. So we were together, like some people, like you're married, right?
Yeah.
But like you leave to go to the office, right? So you might be away from home for like 8 to 10 hours, right? We were together, so we're like, hey, we've been married X amount of time, but like if you actually look at hours,
we've been
together. We've been together a while.
Val's
right?
been married 50 years.
right. I'm not even that old, but I've been married longer than. So so that's what we did. That's what we did prior to solar.
Cool. And so you're doing the marketing company. How did solar enter the equation? How did you meet Michael and Troy?
Yeah. So, and I'll get a little bit deeper on this one, but I got into solar. It's a little bit different story because I got into solar. I wasn't looking to start a solar company.
Okay.
Right. I wasn't even looking to get into solar. I knew nothing about the space.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this was end of 20. This was probably mid 2014.
Okay.
Or even earlier, maybe spring of 2014. It was probably spring of 2014. And so I actually wanted solar on our house.
Okay.
Right, because I thought it was cool. Like,
Sure.
hey, so I've always been into like tech stuff and things like that, right? Used to be back in like the import racing scene and like build Honda engines and stuff like that.
Nice.
Right? Go to the illegal drag and all that stuff like that. That was back in the day. And so I've always just liked tinkering with stuff, building things. And so we did solar, right? And I'm that customer you don't want. Because I'm the guy that has, I had like 6 companies come out with the whole spreadsheet,
Sure.
right?
Multiple quotes guy.
Oh yeah, I had 6 companies. I remember 6 companies came out. Some were still. Sun Valley was one of them, I
Okay.
think. I think who else was? Solar Tops, I think, came out.
Wow.
Right. I ended up going, and I'll tell you this: I do my due diligence.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good about being detailed, so I went a little bit extra on it. I actually, the company I ended up going with, like the classic story, you get what you pay for, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I actually went online. I lived in Peoria at the time. I went to Peoria's website. I looked up this company, and I found permits of customers that they had done projects for.
Oh.
And I went and anonymously knocked on their door and be like, hey, super weird. My name is Val. I think you guys use this company. Like, how was your experience? And they're like, what? Weird dude, what?
Getting references.
Right? And well, and the reason I did that is because, especially being a business owner before and stuff like
Yeah.
that, I know that sometimes like customers, like you might know who's an actual, like who had a good experience, right? Maybe they left you a 5-star review already,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, hey, I know this person had a good experience, so you might call them and be like, hey, can we use you as a reference, right? Like we normally do ask our customers if they can be used as a reference because you don't want to just give away people's
Right.
information. And so I wanted to bypass that and just go straight to the source, right? And so these customers were like, yeah, I think it was fine. They just finished, no big deal. So anyway, fast forward a little bit, I ended up going with this company. Got a great deal I paid $245 a watt for Solar Edge and Canadian solar panels, 11 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that was a great price.
Yeah,
It was a cash deal. I paid them half to kind of start the normal process. And it was a complete disaster, right? I mean, to sort of sum it up. It took 8 months to get to install. Okay, and then it failed inspection 3 times after that, after the inspection, and I've got I even have photos of this because I've told this story before, but as the project was going through, that customer was like, hey, can I get a copy of the plan set? Like I was just
Right.
want to geek out on it. I want to like look at it like this is cool.
Sure.
It was cool to me, right? It was
Yeah.
almost like a hobby. And so I'm looking at the plans and I'm like reading stuff and I'm like, hey, so he's using 1/2-inch conduit. I'm like researching AC code, right? Yeah, no, it gets crazier. I'm like, so he's using 1/2-inch conduit. Is that? I wonder, is that right? So I go look up NEC code, and NEC code says like if you have like 4 number 8 wires or whatever, I don't remember, 4 number 6 wires in conduit, you should be using 3/4-inch conduit, right? So I would point it out to the guy. And
I'm sure they love that.
The guy, yeah, we were best friends, and so I would point it out to the guy, and he was like, dude, I got this, right? Like, it's good.
Right.
Like, what is wrong with you, right? Like, that was his reaction. And so, of course, then it would fail.
Right.
It would fail for the thing I said it would fail for. You know what I mean? And that we went through that, a few times.
Wow.
Right? And then he ended up actually installing the system, worst install you've ever seen. I'll show you, obviously, off of here, maybe some of the photos. But he used, I don't know if you know what hanger bolts are.
No.
They're like kind of like the bolts that we use now.
Okay.
But they're just much longer.
Gotcha.
Right? And I had a tile roof. He drilled through the tile. And these bolts are like maybe like the size of like your pinky, like in thickness.
I think I know what you're talking about now.
He drilled right through them and like into the truss. He missed a bunch of. I found this out later. He missed a bunch of trusses. Right. It was a complete disaster. I lived in Peoria, and you know how Peoria is when it comes to permits.
The worst.
Right. Michelle's still there. She was the inspector. Now she works in I think permitting. Michelle's great. You know what I mean? And here's the thing with City of Peoria. They're very, very by the book.
Yes.
And if you understand that and you just give in to the notion that, like, you know what, they're not going to budge.
Prepare accordingly.
So I may as well just play by their game because they're not about to budge, right? If you're trying to sort of be like, well, the other city does this, they don't care.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're going to go by the book. And so they were the same back then, they're the same now. And so it failed multiple times. After the third time, and what's funny is, inspections fail sometimes. It's people doing this work. Nobody's perfect. They're going to make mistakes. But usually if you're going to fail, it should be for something minor. Maybe they forgot a label, right?
Yeah.
Or some dumb thing, right? But not from a construction standpoint.
Right.
Well, it failed for wrong conduit size, wrong wire size, like critical stuff that's like potentially dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Like from a fire perspective. So after it failed the third time, I ended up firing the guy. I said, you can keep half the money I gave you. I'm keeping all the equipment, right? And basically parted ways. And I had learned during that 8 months, like everything about solar. How do you install it? Electrical code, all these different things. I tore everything off the roof, and it took me 2 weeks. This was over Christmas of 2014. I did have a buddy of mine, Adrian. We're good friends.
Shout out Adrian.
Adrian,
help uninstall
a good buddy of mine. Yeah. Now he came a few other days, and he helped me up on the roof because man, that is not easy work. Taking it down and then reinstalling it the right way. It took me 2 weeks to install a 12 kilowatt system.
Jeez.
Right. Of just kind of figuring
so you
out.
installed your own.
I installed the whole thing myself. Yeah. So my buddy Adrian, he wasn't an installer either. Right. He does flooring or did back then. So he had no idea, but he's a handy guy, and we're good friends. So he's like, yeah, man, I'll come give you a hand. And neither of us has done anything like this before. So like as I'm installing, I'm reading like I'm looking at the sheet with the instructions, right? As like we're doing it. It's like putting together like an IKEA desk.
YouTube wasn't as big back then.
No.
How do I install it?
Right. It was just like Google searches. So like it was like putting together like an IKEA desk. You know what I mean? Like we're just figuring it out. But we did it the right way. We did a 3-course flashing. We still do that today on every single one of our installs. Awesome. Right. And inspection came in, passed on the first try. And it was funny because Michelle was like, you did this yourself, didn't you? Like by that point, she knew. You know what I mean? Like by that point, she knew.
Cannot confirm nor deny.
Right. Yeah. Like
Yes.
So got a green tagged, and that was kind of history, right? So that's how I got into solar.
Wow.
A completely different channel, right? Now, how did I get there from actually starting a solar company? So, two things. Well, one, obviously, I thought that, hey, man, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah.
Right. That was one of it, but the other part of it was also really just kind of, the emotion behind of like most homeowners are not crazy like I am in that sense. Mm-hmm. 99% are not going to go up on the roof. They're not going to do all these different kind of things, and they're just going to trust the contractor, right? And even though I got a good price, it was still $25,000 or whatever the math comes out, $30,000 for that size system. These systems, as you know, they're $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter how much money you make, like. That's a lot of money to anybody.
Yeah.
And the least I feel like as an installer and a contractor you can do is just give them what they expect.
Sure.
Like you don't have to go above and beyond, right? But doing something the right way shouldn't be considered above and beyond.
Like imagine if you never would have got up there or understood
Right.
anything. I mean,
Well, you know what's funny? Actually, I mentioned that earlier. When I uninstalled it and I took the tiles off, he had missed the trusses. Didn't even bother to fill them in. So if you went in the attic, like sunlight was just coming in, right? Like it was that bad.
Oh my god.
Right? It was terrible. And so yeah, so it was really kind of the emotion that was a big driving. That was kind of the why. I wasn't necessarily looking for a why, but that was the why.
Yeah.
Right. And then obviously thinking like, hey, this company's been around for 3-4 years doing this kind of work. Like this can be done better.
Right.
Right. And so that was kind of the spark behind it. Now, what happened next was, that's what I mentioned already on the story. One of my customers that owned a satellite shop on Bell Road up in the Bell and 67th Avenue, I think it was. He was one of my clients that I had sold in the magazine, advertising. So I was actually stopping by to drop off a magazine and pick up a check, $1,200. I remember all these details, right? $1,200 check. And we're just, shooting the breeze. And he's like, yeah, things are kind of slow. I'm thinking about getting something new. And I'm like, oh, what's that? He's like, oh, solar. I'm like, really? Right? And so I get into it, because I was literally, my path was like, I had already between January or whenever I passed inspection, to, a few weeks later, I'm like looking at how do you get licensed, like what's the steps, right? And so I'm telling him the story. And this is where Troy comes into play. He knew Troy. Troy was worked at Solar City. I was doing sales for a couple of years prior. And they were buddies, right? And so they were thinking about starting like a sales org, right? Or something like that. They had reached out to Sun Edison, I think, talked to them. We're about to reach out to Sun Edison back in the day, right? We're dating myself here, right? Sun Edison.
Yeah.
Shout out to Sun Edison.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. But they, anyway, I talked to him and he's like, well, hey, we're looking about doing something with solar as well. We actually have a meeting with this company called Sun Edison Tuesday next week. If you want to like sit in on the meeting. Right. And I'm like, yeah, I'll check it out. Right. So I stopped by and, we meet the following Tuesday and there'll be a lot of names in here that you might recognize, but Jack Walker. So Jack Walker was a Sun Edison rep at the time. Right. So he was a Sun Edison rep. He might be like a Danny White, a light or something, right? Like he was like a rep out there. Right. And so, they had an idea. I'm not sure exactly whose idea. I'm sure, I think obviously Sun Edison worked with Titan at the time. Yeah. And so I forgot 100% of the details, but essentially it went more like, well, hey, okay, you guys want to sell Sun Edison. That's what we knew. I think Troy and Rick, they were like, hey, we should reach out to Sun Edison. Like, how can we sell their product? I think that was the idea, right? And they basically said, well, hey, yeah, you guys can sell it, but you need an installer. And so let us introduce you to Titan.
Gotcha.
Okay. And so, we met with David and we met with Kyle and we met with Heather at the time. And Titan was super, super small. They were around for a couple of years. I know that back then, they were, and I know obviously their story and a lot of, sweat and grind on that end, right? With kind of how they came up to be. And obviously that introduction happened. And we basically, we decided through talking to them, they had, if I remember correctly, they had an internal sales team. And David, had made a decision of like, you know what, we're going to get rid of our internal sales team, and Sun Solar is going to become our sales team.
Okay.
So I take credit for this. I don't know if I should, but I feel like I as a personal, but I think we might have been the first sales org in Arizona. Like I don't know if there was sales orgs prior to this in Arizona.
Yeah.
Like it was still kind of like an in-house type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, with that, obviously with them and with us, we're like, let's just go in this direction and sort of gave up on the idea, like, let's become our own installer because that would be even harder, right, of just starting out and go down that route. So we got with Titan and that's basically what sparked, and that was March of 2015. What was funny, I remember back then, so we had a goal and I was doing, I was the numbers guy, so I'm like doing the math. And, I'm like, dude, if we sell like 8 of these a month,
would be so much money.
Right, because again, like me and my wife had our magazine,
right,
and we did probably about $1 million to $1.5 million in like gross, gross revenue in the magazine. So it wasn't like anything crazy,
right?
Obviously, we made between 150 and 200,000 a year to say, which was fine for the two of us, you know what I mean? But I started doing the math on this. I'm like, man, we had a 290 red line. That's what it was back then, right?
Yeah.
And I think we were selling it for $350 a watt.
Okay.
So there was 60 cents in it. Reps were getting paid 22 cents a watt back then. It was per watt. It wasn't like a red line model, right? And so I'm like doing this math, and I'm like, man, this could be pretty. Look, this is pretty cool, right? And I think our first month that we did it, and it was Troy back then. I was doing proposals. I was doing the proposals, all the back end stuff, and then Troy was selling, right? And I think I forgot the number, but I think we did something like 16 or 17 our first month. And we're like, man, this is awesome, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that was kind of how things started. I think you had asked about Mike. So Mike also knew Rick. They used to play poker together.
Okay.
And so Mike came on originally in the sales side of the business, right? And very early on, obviously, you could see the talent that he had for this, right? And so he quickly became a partner, right really from the start of the company, like right when we were pretty young. This was still back in 2015. And so he came into that picture of that. Rick ended up exiting the company, and we kind of took it from there. I mean, those were some years. That was just like the APS deadline.
Yep.
I think we did, I was looking at this recently, we did 440 sales in June of 2017.
Whoa.
And we're just in Arizona at the time.
Right.
Yeah. So like we were cranking. You know what I mean?
That's insane.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah, we were cranking. You know what I mean? We were cranking. We worked with a lot of the people that are. There's been a lot of people that we've worked with over time.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb from our world.
Oh
yeah. They used to sell with us. Vince.
Yeah.
From Independent. So there's like a lot of people. It's just been kind of cool to see where how everybody, where everybody ended up and kind of where solar took them.
Yeah. No, it is an interesting industry just because. I feel like it's gone through a lot of phases.
Yeah.
Especially back in those days. There was everybody was in a major company, Solar City, Vivint, Sunrun, and then there's small sales orgs starting to pop up, hooking up with, Titan, Arcadia, other installers, Premier. And then it seemed like there was a wave of, like back in, I think it was early 2019, we were a sales org for 6-7 months. We became an installer. I think Fusion did the same thing. You guys did. And so it's been kind of interesting to see how the flow of everything has went and where people go and end up. And I think now, at least this is our belief, is, a lot of good companies still remain. I think the last couple of years has wiped out some of those that have inefficiencies in maybe their sales process or business practices. But I don't know. I feel like there's been this weird shift where a couple of years ago it was like almost like gang related. Like, this is my team and this is me, and everybody sucks. But I think the last few years, and I think it's for the better, and you've championed, I feel like, a lot of that, where it's like we do need to come together, whether which we'll get into, talking about tax stuff. What does the future look like? Regulation. I think for those that are in it for the right reason and are going to be here for the long term, it benefits all of us coming together.
Right.
But before we dive into that, I would like to know, so you're with Titan for about 5 years.
Yeah.
What was sort of or I guess in your own words, why did you decide then to become an installer, and what motivated you to want to take that on versus, staying on the sales side? And there's pros and cons to both sides, but what was the main motivating factor?
I mean, we had a really long time, obviously, we worked with Titan, right? As a lot of companies do as they grew, I think things got more challenging on their end as well, right? And, some of those things started kind of affecting us and our customers in our company, right? And so a big driver was just being able to control that process, right? Obviously, sometimes a lot of people think it's, the money side of it, right? Yes, there's more money in it, obviously, if you're doing the whole thing, but usually you're not actually, what that allows you to do is be more aggressive and attract more salespeople, right? That's what that allows you to do. You don't actually make more money,
right?
But the idea behind it is that you can maybe get more volume.
Right.
And then you can make more money by volume, but you're not going to make more money per project.
Right.
We know that.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
and so the biggest motivating thing I think was just being able to have control of the processes, the customer side, and and if something does go wrong, which it can, again, everybody's human, they're going to make mistakes. At least then you can look back into your own processes.
For sure.
Right. And you can hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
And it's just, even if it's just a mental thing, it's just easier to sort of handle that.
Yeah.
Instead of just feeling helpless.
Sure.
Right. Or well, hey man, this didn't happen. And it's well, I hope they fix it.
Yeah.
Right. So that was really the main deciding thing of kind of why we wanted to switch.
Yeah, and I think same for us is it all came back to control. Control our own destiny, control the customer experience. Yeah, I think, is there money on the install side? Of course. We wouldn't be doing this. Couldn't stay in business, but installers have to make money. They're a legitimate business, and I think for us it just helped us feel more secure long term that the ball was in our court and we were going to make of it whatever we wanted to.
Right.
When it comes to, the evolution, so last 5 years been installing arguably some of the craziest last,
Yeah,
COVID, everything that's going on now. I mean, the tax credit was stepping down, then it went back up, and now it's coming back down again. Before we get in the big, beautiful bill, I mean, what's just generally your thoughts on solar? I mean, I don't know if you have the same perspective of us. Solar is an interesting place because I feel like some of the very best people I've ever met work in the industry.
Sure.
Some of the very worst people I've ever met have worked and some still do. And our guys kind of have it easy, I feel like, because they've never been in an experience where, oh, we did this job and never got paid, except for maybe some of the Sonova and you too.
Yeah.
And I think there's kind of this insulation to some of that where they haven't been out there and got burned and had all these terrible experiences. I mean, how do you feel like from your standpoint now that you're comfortable being an installer, you all are very successful at it, what's the value that you all try to bring to your people on a daily basis on the sell side, do you feel like?
I mean, it's for us, it's always been very customer centric,
Okay.
right? And that continues on, obviously, with kind of the story of how we started, right? And so it's the customer process that I think we try to bring to the sales side as a value.
Yeah.
It doesn't always
Come across that way?
It doesn't always, you're right. It doesn't always come across
I
that
don't
way.
always see it that way.
Right. It doesn't always come across that
Yeah.
way. Sometimes the difficult thing with us, it's because it's funny. Like Mike O'Donnell, obviously, and he's part owner,
Yeah.
and he's a VP at the company, and he runs the sales side of stuff. He was born and bred essentially at Sun Solar. All he
Right.
knows is the Sun Solar process.
Sure.
So everything we do seems very normal to him, and he
Right.
values it, right? And like one of the things that we do, like we literally, in our perfect world, a rep would make a sale, turn it in, and then just let go of the handlebars.
Yeah.
Right? Like trust me, the bike's not going to fall over.
Right.
Right? But reps aren't really used to that.
No.
They are used to, with most installers, they wear every hat. They got the lead, they knocked the
Yeah.
door, they made a sale. They're scheduling the site survey, they're going to the site survey, they're calling the homeowner and
Yeah.
updating them. And one of the things that we struggle sometimes with is like them sort of having that trust and letting us do the process, because I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah.
The reason Mike O'Donnell sells what he does or did, obviously he's got a different role now. Now he's helping other people sell, right, internally and doing trainings, and with his MOD stuff is, he sold 12 megawatts of solar,
Right.
In a short number of years. And the reason he did that is because he could go out and sell.
Right.
If you're going to sit here and do the whole process, like if you're a good salesperson, why are you doing a $25 an hour job?
Right.
Right? Why are you doing a $30 an hour job? Like,
Sure.
let the office people do that. Your time should be worth a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And like that's what the focus should be. But so that's why I think we try to bring that kind of value of like just
Awesome.
taking care of the customer, doing the updates, being a point of contact, and we get really, really good reviews. I mean, most of our reviews are all 5 stars.
Sure.
There's going to be some customer, and it's usually a different perspective
Right.
of why there's a bad review,
Right.
But so that's where we try to bring a lot of value.
Awesome.
And then obviously, from obviously the mic side and
Sure.
the training and some of those things.
Awesome. Now, probably what everybody's been waiting for. It's all the rage on the Facebook Solar Pros group. The big, beautiful bill. I know you kind of been keeping everybody in the loop. You said you were up for how many hours?
37 hours.
37 hours. This man doesn't sleep. Just trying to see, what were they going to finish it? What does it look like? Just overall, what are your thoughts on that? And how do you feel like, give me both sides of the coin. Like, hey, here's some pros to it that I think will be good for the industry. And here's some challenges that we're going to have to get together and overcome.
I mean, I'll dive in a little bit, but I think the current version, I think we got a pretty good version, right? Considerably speaking,
Sure.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah, there were some other ones that were very
It started off worse. Obviously, the best thing would be if they didn't change at all.
Right.
But that's not realistic to think that it's going to happen. Obviously, Trump ran on this, right, and made it a whole thing that like, hey, he's going to end the green new scam and all that stuff as he calls it, and so it was going to change, right? But the original version was worse. It right up until, and you mentioned that I didn't sleep for 37 hours, which is true. When the bill came out, so the Senate version, right? Because there's a whole process here. Right?
Yeah.
The first, the House version came out about 5 weeks ago. Then it went to some committee and it changed, and then they sent it to the Senate, right? The Senate got a version, and the Senate made it worse, right? And the reason they made it worse was I think a lot of people weren't necessarily, if you're not on the install side, like, you know, some of this, a lot of on the sales side, we're focused on things on like, where's the credit and when does it end? Right. On the install stuff, there's a lot more related to domestic content, but what's worse than the domestic content, essentially, not that worse, domestic content is not a bad thing, but it's called FIOC, and you guys, people have heard about this term, you know, talked about this term out there.
Sure.
It stands for Foreign Entity of Concern, okay? So Foreign Entity of Concern is 4 countries, off the top of my head, China, North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela, I think. Okay, those are the 4 enemy countries.
Right.
All right? And so what that means is that you cannot, there's 2 things. One of them is a component level thing, which means that you cannot have, there's a certain amount of percentage that can come from, or that cannot come, it's like the opposite. Basically 37.5% was what they were going to have it at, of your components have to be from a non-foreign entity.
FIOC. Okay.
Right, non-FIOC. So that means that 62.7 could come from China.
Okay.
Right? And then that was supposed to go up to, I think, 50% next year, and then so on and so forth, right? And the problem with the, you know, the challenge in the industry is like almost everything has some tie-in.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Like that's just the supply chain today, the world today. Like batteries, like where do people think the stuff comes from, right? You know, we don't have a lot of those things in the U.S. because it hasn't been necessary. You know, we don't have the mines for it, and we don't have those kind of things. They're just not online. And so what the Senate bill did is it retroactively made this a law as of June 16th, even though the bill came out on like the 27th.
Right.
So it's like 11 days later.
Sure.
I was talking to somebody the other day about this. It'd be like, imagine like the freeway is 75 miles an hour, right? And I'm driving on the freeway, right? And then next week they change it to 65 and send me a ticket.
Right.
That's literally what they were doing.
Right.
And so that's why I stayed up. You know, you're talking about the reason I stayed up is so I was reading this over, and then I couldn't sleep the night. You know, that was Sunday night. Oh no, the night Sunday. I lost track of my days. But I basically stayed up through the entire proceeding of the voting because there was a real risk of some of the equipment. So the problem is it's the components, but it's also the panels.
Right.
So for example, we use Trina panels for war. I mean, we switched off them a while ago, but we still have quite a few projects that had them. And you know, those panels were made in Vietnam or whatever it says on the sticker, right? But part of it is the component. The other part of it is if it's a FIOC country or has ties to a FIOC country. So Trina, Jay Solar, Jinko, and Longi. Okay. Those are all Chinese companies.
Right.
Like that's where they're headquartered. That's where they're from. Right. And so even if they made, like, let's say Trina, I think they were opening up a plant, I think in Arizona, right?
JA.
Maybe JA one, right? It doesn't matter. Like 100% of the stuff could have been made here, built here, all that. Since it's a foreign-owned country, you couldn't use any of those panels. So, and what does that mean? Well, if it was a FIOC country and the date didn't change, then the TPO companies, right, Goodleap, Light Reach, all these companies, they will not get the tax credit on those projects at all. So that potentially puts your entire, you know, pipeline in jeopardy, right? Because it's like, hey, I got to switch out these. Obviously, there's solutions. Well, we're not going to install Trina panels,
right?
But what if you bought a bunch of them?
Right.
What do you do with them, right? And so I was actually the main reason I stayed up was like, am I pulling installs tomorrow or not?
Yeah.
Right. And I was hoping that, you know, because we're in Texas, so in Florida, so I had to kind of keep an eye on that. And I ended up, you know, I waited till 3 a.m. because of the time difference, and I did have to pull an install off because of this reason. Right. And then the final bill came out around 8 a.m. our time, I think, on Monday, and we were able to install that the next day. So I think that was actually today. We did install that job, but it was down to that crazy, like that kind of like wild stress that you could literally like your job's in the pipeline. Now you have to find a solution, a more expensive panel, whatever it might be. So there's so much stuff that goes into that, right? Anyway, so that was the history of it, and then you know it was a better version, right? They did agree to it after 27 or 28 hours of the process in the Senate, and now went back to the House, right? And now it's with the House, and obviously the president's trying to sign this on the 4th of July, right? Which is Friday.
Yeah.
And so you know, now we're not out of the woods yet. I'm very confident that it will not change.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think, you know, I know that there's a lot of stuff around the news about the House and they're saying that they're going to, you know, they don't like it and they're going to kick it back. I think they're just sort of like they have to say that
Sure.
to sort of save face,
Right.
right? Like they can't just sort of sign on it.
Politics.
Right, politics, right? And I'm sure some are upset about
Yeah.
it, but I don't think, because here's the thing, in the Senate, it passed, it was 50-50. It was actually a tie.
Right.
And then obviously the vice president is the tiebreaker, and he got it through. And so I just don't foresee them risking going back into the House and maybe now completely losing the whole thing.
Right.
It just doesn't seem realistic. So I'm pretty confident that we're safe on that end. Yeah, and that was kind of the history. But
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to, any of the details or.
Yeah, no, a couple questions I had. So, the big, quickest, I think just the most, in your face is the ITC.
Yeah.
The 30% ITC is done as of, basically December 31st, 2025. Now, with that being said, so individual homeowners can no longer, apply and be eligible for that tax credit after that time. But there's still business entities, you have commercial aspects, you have the TPO companies. What do you think that means for solar moving forward, and what is that going to look like?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, the homeowner purchase ITC, right? That ends December 31st, okay? And then TPO, both lease and PPAs. So obviously some states, Arizona, Florida is lease only.
Right.
Most of the other states have PPAs. Those continue on through at least the end of 2027.
Okay.
Okay, so that's about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's one of the things that they did do in the bill is there is importantly to what we were just talking about, they moved that FIAC date to December 31, 2025.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't kick in
Gotcha.
until January 1st.
Sure.
Which is a lot more reasonable.
Yeah.
Right, because you got projects in the pipeline, we can finish these up, and then you can switch to something else, right? But on the TPO side, you've got at least in that. But they also put in a provision that you have until, I believe, June 1st of 2026
Okay.
to safe harbor. Okay, and safe harboring basically means that you can buy up equipment.
Okay.
And as long as you have proof that you bought it before the deadline, then you can use it even after the deadline.
Okay.
Now they did put a timeline on it, so whatever you safe harbor by, this off all of memory, so I may need to be fact checked, right? But it should be accurate. June 1st, 2026, and then you have 4 years to get it PTO'd.
Okay.
So that would put you all the way into like 2030.
Wow.
Right?
Sure.
So I do think that there's a solid 2.5 years. Then depending on, I don't know if companies can safe harbor.
Yeah.
Because you basically have to buy it.
Yeah, you
right?
have
Is
to buy it
my
all
understanding.
upfront.
I'm not sure how much you actually have to commit dollar-wise, and if you actually have to like stroke a check.
Sure.
I don't know about those details. I've never looked into them. But we know we have at least a solid 2.5 years, and with safe harboring, I think even a few years past that. So what do I think that's going to look like? Obviously, I think we're going to be busy as hell this year, right?
For sure.
On the purchase side, I mean, obviously, and TPO is great. We do probably about 75% of our volumes TPO. I like TPO products. I think that they're safer, if you will.
Okay.
And then purchasing. And what I mean by that is, it's easier to get in trouble with a purchase,
Right.
And what I mean is, there's so many things in the sale. So you've got the sale, you've got that introductory payment, either 16
Right.
or 18 months. Okay. Then you have to get the tax credit. Everybody qualifies for the tax credit, but not everybody can monetize the tax credit. Right? Like everybody gets it, but it's almost like giving you a gift card that you can't use. Right? Like I give you a gift card to a store that is in New York and doesn't exist here.
Right.
Like what are you gonna do with it? You know what I mean? And so that's how the tax credit kind of works. Like everybody gets the tax credit. So when reps are like, hey, you're guaranteed to get the tax credit, but is it of any use to you?
Right.
Right? And so you have to be able to, obviously, you have to have a tax liability, you have to pay your taxes to get a check back. You will get a check back, that's a whole other story. But there, so there's that. Then you have to, if you do get the money back, you have to make sure that you're not going on a vacation with it. You have to send
Right.
it back.
To the
Otherwise, your
lender.
payment goes up.
Right.
So there's all those details. So there's a lot of stuff to keep track of with the purchase.
Yeah.
A TPO product, third party owned, there's only two variables. Is there an escalator or not?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right? So like it's a lot easier of a transaction.
Sure.
So I've always been a fan of TPO. I like obviously purchase as well. Some people, I did a purchase on my house.
Yeah.
Right? And so some people like purchases, and there's going to be a lot of homeowners this year that want to purchase.
Right.
And there's a limited amount of time. So I think we're going to be very, very busy for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And then next year, obviously, it's going to be can you still sell, some people there's a little bit of confusion. This bill doesn't ban people buying solar.
No.
Some people are like, oh, you can no longer do purchases next
Right.
year. Of course you can.
Yeah.
There's just no tax credit.
Right.
Right? And so it's going to have to be, it's either going to be a lot more expensive, which homeowners, obviously the numbers don't pencil the same, or you're going to have to sell it at a lower price.
Right.
right? So instead of selling it at $3 or $2.80, you might have to sell it at $2.20,
Right.
$2.30, depending on the customer.
Sure.
And so, but it's still very sellable.
Yeah.
I just think, obviously, the industry itself, a lot of people already push TPO only. I think they're going to be, obviously, that's just going to be the default.
Yeah.
Right. So.
No, and I agree. And there's been some good questions, I think, brought up is like, hey, like, let's go to the loan aspect real quick. We have anywhere from somebody could go join a solar company, be 18 years old and sell a loan,
right,
and have zero education,
yeah,
zero experience, zero credentials. Like, yes, that's kind of a dangerous thing. But on the flip side, I see some positives with TPO, which is, hey, and maybe I'll ask you, do you think this is also one step closer to regulation with TPO, just because there are price per watt caps? Mm-hmm. And of course loans have those too, but it's, there's some ways to get around them with different items, but a lease is pretty much like, hey, here's kind of the maximum amount we're willing to charge this customer. But I know in the past, and like I'm going to go give a presentation to realtors in a couple weeks, that leases tend to be a little bit harder to take over, especially if it has an escalator. Mm-hmm. Just because somebody walking into there, it's 10 years into a 20-year escalator, or 25 years, it's only going up from there and not to their benefit. But do you feel like this move is one step closer to regulation, and what are your thoughts on the idea of regulating the solar industry?
I mean, I think we're seeing that already kind of happening. And to your point, I think we see it more on the TPO side. Right, like I know, for example, we work really closely with LightReach. They're great.
Yeah, they are.
And they themselves, one of the things I like about LightReach, like they have their approach is they call it common sense approach, right? So they have a lot of stuff that like they do that's like, hey, that's just common sense to do these type of things, right? They've got, like, for example, in their app, and the customer has to like reaffirm things, right? They've got, if somebody's over a certain age, I forgot if it's 65 or 75, that there's like a secondary follow up. And what's interesting, a lot of the reps, they fight back on this because that is normally sent out later. It's not sent out at the point of sale. And a lot of us like, why can't they send it out at the point of sale? Like, this is annoying, right? I talked to them, and they did that deliberately because they actually want the homeowner to sort of like think about it, questions, like review it separately. Because when you sign up for a deal, like there's a flurry of stuff going on, right? Paperwork, you just sat through an hour and a half presentation. Like, you're just trying to get it done, and you're just signing stuff. Right. So like, it's those kind of common sense things that they're doing. They recently did a thing with their credit. And now that there's payment cap, depending on your credit, which is a responsible. It's kind of like if you buy a car, right? Like, you might only get, or a house. Yeah. When you buy a house, they look at your credit, and they're like, hey, well, you can only approve you for $500K, $600K, $400K, whatever that number is. So I think they're taking the same kind of mentality and being like, look, if somebody's overextending themselves, they're gonna end up not paying. Yeah. Right. So I mean, that one might be more. That one's more like probably consumer protection. Yeah.
And maybe regulation's not the exact right word, but I think it's bringing in some rules and some boundaries, which I think, and we've had conversations, you've been very vocal about it online, of almost self-regulation. I think the smart companies that, they self-regulate because you have to. Like, that's the thing. You're in business long enough, you figure out the tricks of the trade. Yeah. Like, it used to be, we're giving you a 78% offset, but tell them it's 100, or hey, it's pretty much the same thing. It's like, no, it's not even close to the same thing. So I see some positives on that, because unfortunately, I think, one of the biggest complaints, I'm sure, with the loan was promising the tax credit. Like, that's something that's just been a constant complaint. And you're right, like, no solar salesperson's a financial advisor, an accountant, a notary. No, notary. We were talking about notaries earlier. Just somebody that has credentials on, like, being able to sell a loan. Right. Even having any education other than what their manager told them, which is everybody gets the tax credit. Right. So, and I guess for you all, if you don't mind just sharing, and you don't have to go super detail, but what steps have you all taken that you feel like has made the experience long-term better for you, your reps, your customers, as far as kind of like the internal regulating, as it were? Yeah, so I mean, we've been doing that for a long time, and like, that's a good word for it. Like internal regulation, like self-regulation. And we're really doing it for really the homeowner, right? But we're doing it for the rep. They might not believe it, right? We're doing it for ourselves. This is for you. Right. This is for you guys, right? They may not believe it, but trust me, they enjoy when their phone's not getting blown up. Like Mike O'Donnell tells you, he tells the story a lot. He's had the same phone number forever. Yeah. Right. And like, whenever he gets a call, he's expecting it to be a happy customer with a referral, not like, holy crap, who's calling me? What happened? Right. Which a lot of reps, I think, run into. Sure. And so it is for the reps as well. It protects everybody. And so, on our end, we do a couple of things. One of them, which not a lot of companies have, I know Sunrun does it.
I wish more companies would do. I know that more are working on doing it.
Yeah.
Is validating consumption, not production. Like a lot of people validate production to make sure that the system does what it's. Honestly, I don't think that's really an issue in the industry. You know, everybody's using either a Solo or an Aurora or a subcontractor hub or a Enerflow, right? All these tools, and they're all pretty dialed in at this point. That shading and all that, like they're going to be pretty close. I don't think I don't think there's a massive growing problem in the industry of underperforming systems.
No.
Okay, but what we do see. And we see we were internal sales oriented about 2 years ago, and then we started working with dealers. So like we really expanded our base of who we're working with. And one of the things that we did see through that process was, reps. And I don't think most of the time it's malicious.
No.
Right now, sometimes it is, right? But I don't think that's the main problem. I think it's either a lack of training, and just sort of estimating. Right. So to your point, a rep will go in and they'll put in usage of 15,000 kilowatt hours and sell them a system that produces 15,000 kilowatt hours.
Right.
Okay. Well, we require a copy of the bill, like I think every installer does.
Yeah.
It just depends on for what purpose.
Yep.
We obviously need it for different things. The finance companies need a copy, right?
Yep.
But internally, we will go and we will measure out that consumption, right? And we have a variance, right? It's plus or minus 5%. Well, actually minus 5%. So if their actual usage that they put on there is off by 5%, then we either have to have the customer acknowledge it, or we have to have the rep go back and sell more panels, right? Because obviously, if that homeowner had an expectation of it being 100%, and then it's and like we've literally had a situation where it was 100%, and we do the math and it's 64%.
Jeez,
That's a massive difference, right? And I know there's two trains of thoughts in this industry. I understand the finance companies, like for example, a LightReach, for example, or a Sunrun. They're looking at like, look, we don't get into the remaining bill. We're selling you power.
Right.
I'm selling you this many panels. It produces this much energy, and it costs this much.
Right.
Right. Like that's contractually that's what we're selling you.
Right.
The problem is, I don't know if you want to call it a problem, but the thing is that's not how it's being sold.
No.
Nobody's going like, hey, you're getting 25 panels and it's $150 a month. Because then the homeowner's going, yeah, but what is it going to do? Right? And yes, you can be vague. It's like, well, it's going to produce this much power and it's going to offset this much power.
Sure.
Right? But homeowners aren't educated enough to know how much they use. And not just that, you get into complex markets like Arizona or like Texas. Right? Nevada's pretty straightforward, at least for the time being. It's more or less one-to-one net metering, right? Florida is one-to-one net metering. So those ones are easy, right? But you get into a complex market like Arizona, like you really have to understand what that solar actually does.
Sure.
Because the homeowner, like if you don't mention it, sometimes it's sort of just lying by omission. Like you're not lying,
right?
And you never said anything, but the customer is led to believe. You look at a proposal and it says 100% in nice big letters, and that pie chart is filled in, right? And you don't talk about it, what is the homeowner going to think? Well, I used to pay the electric company. Now I'm just going to pay the solar. Why would I still get a bill? So you never told them they're not going to get a bill, but that's what they're going to assume. Now, should they be asking? Yes, but you don't know what you don't know. How would you know what to ask? And so I do feel that the industry, reps, companies, like have a responsibility to actually make sure that information, like the customer understands what they're signing up for. So back to what you were saying. So, we measure the consumption. We have different forms internally where a homeowner signs off, hey, I understand this is my payment. I understand this is my estimated utility bill. Another thing that I've heard an argument in the space, because there are companies out there, I'm not going to mention who they are. They know who they are.
Come on, man. We can cut it out.
Right. They
Come
know,
on, Val.
They know who they are. That they
know who you are.
Yeah. That they hide the remaining bill on their proposals, for example. Right. And I've talked to them, and I've talked to their owners, and their justification is like, well, how are we going to know what they're going to do in the future? Right? Like, what if they buy an electric car and now they use more? Like that number, if you told them the remaining bill is going to be $30 and now it's $80, were you a liar? And no, I wasn't, because at the time that I sold it to you, that was an accurate number. I can back into that number, right? So it happens all the time. We have homeowners that we do an analysis, and we today versus a year ago, and say, hey, it looks like your usage went up by 25%.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I guess I did get a pool. Oh yeah, I guess that did happen. Right? And the homeowner, that's where we found that's where we don't have bad reviews related to this kind of stuff.
Sure.
Because the homeowner, they call in upset, thinking there's something wrong with the solar system or that we scammed them. We end the call, they're not necessarily happy because they don't like that the bill's higher.
Right.
But they understand they weren't scammed. Right? They understand that, like, oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I guess I didn't understand that that if I add more stuff, obviously it's common sense, but it might be common sense to somebody that's in solar, right? If the regular homeowner's not going to know this stuff. And so to me, it's always been about, you can always back into that number. Rates go up, right? If rates go up and you don't have true one-to-one net metering, their bill is going to be higher. Again, you can point to that. Hey, yep, I did tell you $30, but remember APS went up 17% in June or whatever that example might be, right? That's why your bill is a little bit higher. Oh, okay, I get it, right? So like we have them sign off on the estimated remaining bill. Obviously, there's a disclaimer that says, hey, this is based on the production and consumption at the time of the sale, right? We have them sign off that they understand what the payment is, like a lot of this kind of stuff. And it really, again, it helps protect first and foremost the homeowner. It protects the rep. It protects our company.
Right.
You know, we don't have any lawsuits. We don't have any AG complaints.
Same.
Like we haven't gone through those kind of things. And you can stay focused on your business when you're not bogged down.
Fighting fires.
Right. Like that stuff's not fun. You know what I mean?
Could have prevented.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting too, because as I think about it, you know, having mainly on the sales side, but now being an install company, you know, when somebody calls us in 1, 2, 3 years, A, is the rep even going to be here?
Right.
B, if they are they going to remember everything they said in the home? No.
Right.
The customer's not going to remember. All we really have to go off of is that agreement that was signed and the proposal. And that's where we agree. Like, there's been questions about, like, the offset, because if it says 100% offset or even 120, they're still going to have a bill, but at least it gives you a basis or a foundation to understand what was sold, and at least a baseline if you have the right protections in place of, like, what most likely was explained. So but if it says 0 and there is no offset, what do you have to pull from as an install? Nothing. And to be frank, I think to the reps out there, like, you're not getting those calls, or if you are, you're just pushing them to us. If the lender gets the call, do you know who they're going to? They're going to us as well. So
and I've heard that stuff out there. I mean, it never happened to us, but I've heard that happens out there from the standpoint of people getting defunded, like later down the road. You know what I mean? Like later down the road. And you just mentioned something that made me think of, this has happened, and this isn't, it's not necessarily a knock against reps, so don't, right? But a lot of reps out there, they will definitely be like, well, hey, like, I'm going to talk to the customer. Like they don't want something. A lot of times reps don't want our office talking to the customers, right? They're like, I'm going to be the point of contact. Like, this is my customer. And 100%, right? They got that customer as their customer. When that rep is no longer at the company, what is it still their customer?
No.
I've experienced this. We've had reps that either moved, went to another company, whatever might have happened, right? And when it was sold, it was all about as their customer. Now that they're no longer at Sun Solar, hey, sorry, I no longer work there. Can you call them? Right? And so, like, people sometimes don't understand that. That's why that's so important as a company. Like, you have to make sure that these things are getting done. I guess further to that point, and when this happens, right? Even with us now, like, customers still complain sometimes. And we're always able to defend ourselves. Like, we'll get an email from, it might be from LightReach, it might be from Dividend, and they're like, hey, this customer's upset. They said they were never told this, they were never told that. Well, we got the receipts, right? And so we can go back to a call recording, we can go back to a signed document, say, like, look, I wasn't in the home, and I'm not saying, like I said, I don't think most reps are actually malicious. I don't think they're doing the bad stuff. The problem is you're sitting in an hour to a 2-hour, meeting. There's a lot of stuff you go over. Right? And even if you take 10 minutes to talk about the tax rate, which nobody does, that's a long time, right? Like, nobody's going to sit there and talk about it for 10 minutes, right? But even if you did 10 minutes, that's like just a portion of the 120 minutes you were there. That's like 10%.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's less than 10% of the entire conversation. And so, having stuff in place to make sure that you can then defend yourself and be like, look, man, we did our job. They talked about a lot of stuff. This was 2 years ago. How's the homeowner going to know? They might have, maybe with that time that happened, they got a text and they were looking at their phone, right? Like, so it's really, I think, important to make sure that you are covering your bases and making sure the homeowner, like, understands. Now, if a homeowner signs something, I do think, having said everything that I just said, there is definitely a level of, of homeowner responsibility.
Of course.
Right? And I know these contracts, these 30-page contracts with the DocuSign that just makes it easy, where you just click and it goes right to the bottom. Nobody really pays attention to those. And it's probably unrealistic to think that they would. Right? We all kind of probably do it the same. I mean, I'm pretty big on reading contracts, especially on the business side. You want to make sure you understand what you're signing. But most homeowners are not. The font is small. There's all kinds of disclaimers. Will it hold up in court? Yeah. Like, hey, the customer signed it, right? But I do think we can do a better job in the industry as installers to I don't believe in disclaimers. I believe in, like, making sure they actually understand what they're signing.
Yeah.
So we can have our own documents. We have a document. It's called a customer sales acknowledgement. It's like 60. It's like giant font. There's only 4 things on the page, like for a TPO.
Right.
Here's your payment. Here's your escalator. Here's your new electric bill based on the things we talked about.
Yeah.
And then there's a space where the homeowner fills in where you promised anything at the point of sale that's not in writing. The homeowner fills all that in on their own. It goes to their email. Okay. If they put in none and then call me 5 months later and say, hey, I was supposed to get $500 back, I can pull that shit out. I say, I'm sorry, but it's not on here. Right? And if they go, I forgot to put it on there, well, how do I know you're not making it up? Right? And so again, you can protect yourself by having these things. It protects the homeowner, but it really protects the company as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting thing because I had David on here from Titan a while ago, and he did mention you by name just as far as like I'm sure Val has something as far as like when it comes to a leftover bill and things. Yeah. How do you think we as an industry, I mean, that's what's so difficult, and I think probably reps don't understand. Like you told us, hey, we got into Florida. How many jurisdictions, AHJs are in Florida?
369.
369, right? And even with the utilities, it's like it's hard to kind of figure that out. But I guess you guys have kind of figured out your own process for like the bill afterwards. Do you think there will ever be something where even if it's like, I don't know, for this utility or that utility, like what do you think the odds are of coming up with something that's just standard across the industry that somebody actually maybe takes the time, has the means to figure something out that's somewhat accurate? Because even with Solo, it's like, I don't know where they're pulling that number, but I feel very confident it's not accurate. And I think honestly, in some ways, they're probably erring on the side of caution because they don't want, it's kind of a CYA. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, when it does come to regulation, I think some things will happen naturally. Like the sell side with TPOs, there's so much stuff in there that it's just going to be impossible to kind of like do continuous bad, wrong, unethical things and actually get it to the finish line. But there are things on the back end where we're getting the calls, whether it's offset, whether it's the remaining bill. What are your thoughts as far as what regulation actually might be?
I think those things are tough. The reason they're not, everybody's got their own perspective on it. I've talked to probably every major software platform, right, on proposals.
Yeah.
And again, everybody has kind of what they feel like their role is, right? Most of them feel like their role that they're a design tool.
Okay.
Right? And so then, so most, right. No, a lot of them,
very interesting.
A lot of them, like that's their approach. Like, hey, we're just a design tool. It's up to the installer. Most of it goes, it's up to the installer. Right. So to your point about going into different cities, and again, my approach and thinking is probably a little bit more aggressive, or, I don't know if that's the right word, but I don't think you should go into an area that you don't understand.
Right.
I don't think customers should be your guinea pig.
Yeah.
Right? That may not from a business standpoint. There might be some business, leaders, owners on here that are like, Val's crazy, right? Because, it leads to slower growth.
Yeah.
And I guess it depends on what your goal is, right? If your goal is to be in as many states as possible and make up as much money as possible as you can before the whole thing craters, then by all means, I guess, right? If that's what your approach is. But you're certainly not doing it for the customer.
Right.
It's certainly not helping with that. So you go into these new jurisdictions, you go into these new utilities, and like, for example, we won't sell in a utility that we haven't built out our own calculator in-house to figure out what the bill is. And a lot of those are pretty simple. Like, it's not hard to get this information. Right? But a lot of installers, that's not their thing. That's like, hey, we're open in that whole state, right? They take the sale in, and a lot of installers, here's the other thing. Everybody points the finger at somebody else. Yeah, most everybody, not everybody, most everybody points the finger at somebody. Installers, I've heard them go like, hey man, we're just the installer, right? It's not our responsibility. It's on the rep to figure out how that works.
Right.
Then the rep goes, well, that's not on me. That's on the proposal software.
Right.
Because that's the thing I'm using. The proposal software is like, that's on the, like everybody, it just goes in a circle. Right? And so you need to want to do it, right? And unfortunately, I don't know if there's enough want at this point, and apparently there's not enough pain yet either. I think where it can, and I think there will be more regulation. Nevada is probably the best example of regulation so far. So Nevada, not only do you have to be a W-2 employee, and the reason they did that is because, and this is another funny thing. So sales org and installers, okay? A sales org is a 1099 contractor or their own LLC or business, right? Mm-hmm. What a lot of people don't realize, and maybe they don't want to look at it this way, they are a subcontractor of the installer.
Right.
Like if I sub out an MPU, right, this is the best example I can probably give. If I sub out an MPU Okay, I have a third party do it. They install it. Something's wrong with that MPU. Who's the homeowner going to call? Right, they're going to call me, right? And by law, I am the GC, let's say, or the electrical company. It is my responsibility of whatever work they do. Now, of course, I'm going to go back to them and make them fix it, but they're not really the responsible party. Right. I'm the responsible party.
You're the one held accountable.
I'm the one that's held accountable. It's on our contract. So same thing when it comes to sales, right? And obviously, like this wouldn't be possible without the sales partners,
right?
Like that's the lifeblood of the entire industry, okay? But the ultimate responsibility comes back to us,
right?
And so I actually feel I don't think it's necessarily the finance company's responsibility, right, to make sure that this is sold. You know, there are some stuff. Should it be their responsibility about like how the tax, you know, that you got to pay it down? Yeah, and they should probably do a welcome call.
Yeah.
Right. But the way it's sold on the offset part, is that the sales org's responsibility? Maybe you can make a case that is their responsibility. But since they're not the actual contractor of record, they're not going to get held accountable.
Yeah.
So I think it's the installer's responsibility to make sure that this stuff is done correctly.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I think, you know, looking at things when you take that ownership perspective, it's the only, in our opinion, the only perspective you can take, because if you're waiting for the sales rep or the lender or the proposal software to take responsibility, they're not going to. And at the end of the day, it's on your contract, it's on your license, it's on ours. If there's a complaint, they go to the ROC. Who do they call? They call us, right? They're coming after our license. We're the ones. So, yeah, I definitely feel, you know, aligned on that and think it's super important. And that's just what I wish, you know, from a sales perspective, which was my background, that everybody from that realm kind of understood. It's like, we're not doing these things to make it harder to get a deal through. Yeah. Like, we don't get paid until it's installed either. So it's like,
we were talking about that earlier. Because, a lot of times, like, man, we got to, you know, this has to happen faster, this and that. Right. It's like, we make zero money.
Right.
And
we're actually negative.
We're actually negative. And sometimes, you know, depending on, obviously, the sales partner, if they're doing marketing, if they bought leads, they might have some skin in the game as well. You know, so maybe they already paid a setter, right? Sure. So they may have some costs, but we do as well. So, like, we are just as motivated, if not more motivated, to get that installed. You know, or like roofs, for example, bad roofs. You know, I know that nobody loves it when a roof gets DQ'd. I don't love it either. We just, most of those, not most, but a good majority of them don't go through. Yeah. Right? And so now we ourselves are going like, oh crap, I'm about to risk a job that's already in the pipeline. Right. But you can't install on a freaking, contractually we're required to make sure that roof is good for 10 years. Yeah. Right? By the TPO companies. And you know, if it's blatantly bad and you're installing on it, again, you're just putting the customer, you're putting the customer in a super crappy situation, right? And you're putting yourself as a company in a bad situation, right? We talked about, you know, some of the companies that went out of business in the past. Some of the stuff I've heard out there was that, you know, they were spending $100,000 a week on roofs, on fixing roof problems.
I've heard the same.
And so those things, like, they're gonna come back around. Yeah. You know, the bad installs, the bad roofs. Right. You know, your service department ends up being bigger than your installation department. Yep. That's not how that should be. No. Like that, you're not gonna stay cash flow positive. In that kind of scenario.
Yeah, because service, and that's one thing, you know, with Nate and them, we've really made it a focus. Not that we're trying to make money on service per se, but at least getting it back to net neutral, to where it's not like costing money, like it can be self-sufficient. And I think that's, there's just so much that goes into this that at the end of the day, the ones that are left holding the bag and whose customer it really is comes down to us. I mean, they're paying the payment to the bank, but it's on our contract. We're the one that is held accountable for it. And so, no, I agree with you, and it's nice to see. And I think a lot of, you know, you want to give a benefit of the doubt. Most, I think, of the companies still around on the install side, they have to have these sort of provisions and protections. And it's just a natural part of regulation that's unofficial, but I think in some ways the industry is regulating itself.
One thing I was going to mention, we were talking about, and I start going on that path about regulation. Like Nevada is probably the best example that at least I'm aware of about where they put regulation. So, and that's where we went down that road about talking about the sales and how the money flows. A lot of people, and even installers, so I talk about from the sales side, and they're kind of like, hey, they see it as like they hire the installer, right, versus kind of the opposite, right? And that's, you know, that part doesn't really matter, but a lot of installers see it that way. So I've talked to installers. We talked about it earlier. We're like, well, hey, that's not my responsibility. I'm not the one that sold it. Right. They don't understand. It's your license. It's on your contract. Right. It is 100% your responsibility. So sometimes installers. So the reason Nevada went W-2, because nobody thinks about their employee like that. You guys have employees, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If one of your employees, does something, right? Would you be like, hey man, that wasn't me, that was John.
Right.
Or that was Stephanie or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like nobody would say that. Nobody would like point the finger at their employee as a business and say, that's not my responsibility, right?
Yeah.
That's their responsibility.
Yeah.
And so the reason that Nevada did that is because to really kind of, it was a little bit of a blurred line. It's no longer blurred.
Right.
And so in Nevada, there's definitely a lot more responsibility. So there's that part of it. But the other thing is Nevada, for example, requires a mandatory welcome call. And it has to be done within 48 hours of the sale. And you have to keep it on record for at least 4 years.
Wow.
And if there's ever a complaint about something you should have covered in the call and you can't produce it, the homeowner can cancel the contract.
Wow.
Up to 4 years. Okay?
Jeez.
And then that call, they tell you exactly the things you have to go over.
Okay.
Right? You have to tell them about their payment. You have to
Right.
tell them about timelines. You have to tell them about that they're still going to have a remaining bill. Right? And where I'm going with this is Nevada is our lowest cancellation rate in all of our markets.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's our lowest cancellation. It's under 20%. I forgot. I looked at it last time. Right, it's somewhere in the teens.
Jeez.
Right, which for the industry is relatively low.
Yeah.
Right, you hear some 55% cancel rates at some of these companies. Right. Right. And so you hear about some of these cancellation rates, and it was interesting what that regulation did.
Yeah.
Because all the sales that come through, and it's also our biggest market.
Wow.
So we do the most sales in Nevada.
Sure.
And we have the lowest cancellation rate.
Wow.
So which state do you think is the most profitable for us? Right?
Nevada.
Right. And the reason that there's less cancellation is because the sales have to be a lot more thorough.
Yeah.
The customers have much better expectations. Right? A lot of homeowners get poached because of somebody poached them.
Yeah.
Right? And they permit pulled. Right? And they used Solar Scout. Never mind that.
Yeah.
No, you can cut that part out.
No, we can throw people in the this. It's okay.
Yeah, it's funny. Solar Scout's great. We don't use them. There's a lot of positives to it, but I think you can also see ongoing. Anyway,
Never used them.
Yeah, that's a side conversation. Cut that out. Yeah. So some customers get poached, right? Because people go permit poaching, which is, I mean, man, that's such a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a whole other subject.
Way to go about
yeah, that's such a. I don't even know the word to use for. We've actually sent companies cease and desist letters.
That's awesome.
We have.
Yeah, you should.
Like from an attorney.
100%.
You know what I mean? For I forgot the term for it. Where they're interfering with the contract. But yeah, man. I mean, people worked hard for that in the space. Knocking doors, making sales is freaking hard.
Yeah.
It's super hard. And then to have somebody just steal it from you.
Yeah.
Like, go knock.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or however, whatever you do to get your sale. And if you happen to knock on one that was already sold, hey, that's fair game. Right. But to sort of cheat, I mean, that's a whole. Obviously, that's a whole other subject. But a lot of homeowners, we find, they end up canceling in other markets because they find out whatever they were told wasn't accurate.
Right.
And sometimes, sometimes they'll ask our office about it.
Right.
And sometimes reps are like, why are you guys talking to my customers? And you told them this. I'm like, because they asked us a question.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, like if a customer goes, yeah, hey, so I had a question. The rep said, like, I wouldn't be paying anything. Is that accurate? Right? Sometimes reps literally go like, hey, you guys shouldn't answer anything. There's like, send them back to me. I'm not comfortable with those kind of things. Yeah. And we've always pushed back. It's like, man, if a customer asks us a question that's true, we're going to answer it in a truthful way.
No, that's awesome.
Right? And if they go, hey, they told me this is completely free and I'm not going to get a payment, or they told me I'm not going to still get a utility payment, like, well, no, you did sign up for a contract. Looks like it's $145 a month. If you have any additional questions, your rep would probably be the best person to answer that. Right? Because, we customer service doesn't do sales.
Yeah.
But there's some stuff that's not a sales issue. Right. Do I have a payment or not, and what's the amount of my payment? Is not a sales question.
Yeah.
Right? So in Nevada, like, that stuff doesn't happen. You have to go over that. And again, our highest market. So
interesting.
What it proves is, and this is Michael Donald has said this a lot too, like, we've been selling solar ethically, transparently for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I've proven you can sell a lot of solar and you can do it the right way.
Sure.
A lot of people, I think it's in their own head that, like, oh man, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Trust me, you can do it. People have done it. People are doing it. One of our, actually, I think it's our top rep in Nevada, his name's Daniel. He did 17 last month.
Wow.
And obviously it's early in the month, so
sure.
one or two, law of averages, probably one or two are going to fall out.
Yeah.
But as of right now, when I looked this morning,
it's awesome.
0% cancel out of all those.
Jeez.
Right? And he's in Nevada.
Yeah.
And he's dealing with the regulation.
Doing it
it's
the
possible.
right way.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely possible. And that kind of comes back to, I think, just the old philosophy that, like, doing business the right way, treating people the right way, it never goes out of style.
Right.
It doesn't matter what happens, in the world, in the economy, it's still a relationship business. And the thing we always think about too, man, it's 2025. Like, you got ChatGPT, you got
Right.
Google, like, they're gonna find out.
That's my
like,
new best friend, ChatGPT.
Yeah. So I'll call you Val GPT right here. Well, yeah, no, I appreciate all the directness, the candor through all this. I mean, as you kind of look, none of us know what the future holds, but eventually down the road, when you stop doing business, retire, whatever you want to do, like, what do you, if you were to be able to look back, like, on your legacy, let's just talk maybe solar specifically, or your life, however you want to internalize it. What do you want, like, your legacy to be?
I think a lot of the stuff that we've been doing, I for personally, like, made a change to the industry and to the homeowners.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a positive change.
Yeah, positive.
Yeah, right. You can make changes in other ways as well. Just a positive change, and I'm always open to, like, helping companies, reps, I mean, you mentioned, like, the solar, the Solar Pros group, on Facebook, Solar Pros and Solar Community, all the different ones. People see I'm always in there when I can and answering questions.
Yeah.
I've always been a champion for people that, like, want to do things the right way.
Right.
And, like, hey man, I have people from other companies, sales guys that they met at the office.
Yeah.
Like, hey man, I'm trying to understand how SRP works better. Can you help me out? Like, not a problem.
Yeah.
Right. Like, obviously, there's some stuff internally that, like, maybe we have our own, especially from a sales standpoint.
Sure.
Right. That maybe you want to kind of keep closer to the chest. But when it comes to, like, how solar works, things like that, how does tax credit work? What's going on with this big beautiful bill, all that kind of stuff. Like, if we can help the industry get better by exposure.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times, like I said earlier, most of the stuff I think you see in the space is not on purpose, is not malicious, is people don't know any better.
Yep.
Nobody's ever trained them, or they train them the wrong
It's
way.
like the telephone game. They heard what their manager said, what their manager said, and their manager
so
said.
I'm actually a big believer of, like, just getting information out, and then people will pick up on it and they'll start asking questions.
Right.
Right? And then they're like, holy crap, I've been doing this wrong.
Yeah.
Right? If they've been doing it wrong. And so really, like, from a legacy standpoint, like, I hope that that's the kind of impact that I can make on the space. I'm obviously not going to do this forever, right? And so that's kind of that's what makes me passionate.
Awesome.
That's my big thing. That's what makes me, I guess, to wrap it up, like, that's what makes me passionate about being in the space still.
Sure.
Right? Because it's not easy.
Yeah. No, it's not, especially on the install side.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I just kind of look at you as a champion for our industry, champion for the Facebook group.
There you go.
For everybody out there. But no, we appreciate you coming on. We've always admired you, Mike, and your company, just the way you guys do business. And I think at the end of the day, one of our core values is reputation over revenue.
Yeah.
And you guys definitely embody that. So thank you all for coming on, checking it out. Please like, subscribe. If they're not already following you, how can they find you on social media and your company?
Pretty sure Val Berechet. Just add Val Berechet on Instagram, Facebook.
Cool. And then at Sun.
Yeah, Sun Solar Solutions.
Okay.
Yeah, Sun
I wasn't
Solar
sure if you guys have
Actually, I think
retweeted
it's
it.
Sun Solar Solutions Official.
Okay.
I think is what it is. It is on Facebook. We also have SNSLR because it's cool to drop
Oh,
the
okay.
vowels.
Yeah.
Right.
The vowels, not
Yeah.
the vowels.
Yeah, right. Yeah, don't drop the vowel, just the vowels. Yeah, so it's funny. Actually, our internal sales is SNSLR.
Okay.
Like Sun Solar, but
Yeah.
you drop the vowels. And then our customer facing is Sun Solar Solutions. So.
Okay. Awesome. Well, yeah, once again, appreciate you coming on.
man,
We'll
thank
see
you,
how
Brian.
the big, beautiful bill all shakes out. If anything crazy goes on, maybe we'll get some more.
I'll
of
be
your
on
thoughts
Facebook
it.
with the updates.
So thank you guys. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, and hopefully this makes it into the Facebook group.